Hey everybody, this will be a warning to all politicians. I'm running for president 2024, part 10. Um, so looking at what's going on in our society, the discussion should be about police brutality, tactics, racism, which flows both ways. There's plenty of evidence if you go online and on YouTube of black supremacist groups. You saw the Jewish people murdered by the black Israelites in Jersey. You see Nation of Islam saying all other races were created by a mad scientist named Yaqub to punish black people, because the scientist Yaqub was black, African, and he created all these other races until eventually he got to the white man and he instructed him on how to trick and deceive Africans and punish them because they made fun of him and were cruel to him because of the size of his head, because he had a larger brain or something like that. That's true. I'm not making that up. You look at it right now. Put in Yaqub and Farrakhan and Nation of Islam and stuff, and you will see that is what is being taught to African Americans, some African Americans in this country. And who knows, in many places around the world it might be taught. So if you're another one of these quote-unquote minorities, how do you feel about that? If you're Mexican, that African Americans think they're the supreme race, and you're some kind of subspecies that was created by a scientist. If you're Asian, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about these things? There's a lot of this kind of sickness, and it's granted, it's in white America too. The Ku Klux Klan teachings and supremacist groups, Nazis, we've got it too, no doubt. There is no doubt, but we stand up against it. Most normal white people stand up against all that kind of stuff within our communities. The average white person doesn't want anything to do with the Ku Klux Klan, skinheads, Nazis, you name it. And a lot of the African American community is going to have to come out against black supremacy theologies also. We should all try and strive to live together and live in harmony and treat each other equally. Now, these groups, Antifa, Black Lives Matters, other groups, they use, if you look now what's going on in our streets in a lot of places, and you look back at Vietnam, it's the same tactics of the Viet Cong. If you look at the tactics of Al Qaeda and ISIS, the same thing there. And you have the illicit drug connections of funding different groups and stuff. You have different governments funding different groups, anarchist groups and guerrilla groups and things like this south of the border and in Africa and in the Middle East. And so a lot of this money's floating around out there and being used to support things like this because they want to overthrow this society. Now, you were outraged. I was outraged watching that video of what happened to George Floyd. And then, like I said, you asked me, that cop, no doubt it should be first-degree murder if you ask me, and should get the death penalty. There's no doubt he did wrong and should be punished for it. There's no doubt the other cops should have stopped him. But before all this happened, you look at these cities, these mayors, these sanctuary cities, this everything where they're soft on crime and stuff. They don't have the community involvement that they say they do. You have these city councils. A lot of these cities are all African American or mostly African American, and it's the politicians and stuff who instruct the police departments. They're given a job: stop crime, get rid of crime, makes the streets safe. Then they're not given the tools or enough funding to actually interact with the community on positive levels. All they're told is to patrol and this and that, and to be aggressive where there is a lot of crime. I know racial profiling does go on in some areas, but I also know not every person who is African American that is pulled over is being racially profiled. That's ludicrous. So I say with technology and stuff, we can do away with a lot of that racial profiling. With identification tags and stuff that'll ping, and also catch your speed and stuff. That's another thing. You can cut down on bogus speeding tickets. You have one of these things in your car. The cop is using radar. Well, this thing is also, with GPS and everything, also calculating speed of a vehicle. It's got the vehicle code. The cop pulls you over, says he's giving you a speeding ticket. This thing will record that, and then the officer has no way to manipulate it. This thing will record what the vehicle speed was, regardless of what the radar gun says, or regardless of what the officer says, and record the vehicle speed. And you'll be able to get that data from your vehicle also, when you go to court, or to fight, just fight your ticket. Maybe you won't even have to go to court. Maybe all that data can just be transmitted to the court to show that you were not speeding and the officer pulled you over anyway. And then, maybe if you feel it was racial profiling, then you could handle it that way. You'd have some evidence. Look, I wasn't speeding. He pulled me over, even though the data shows I wasn't speeding. So you would have that. You got to look at tactics like stop and frisk and everything. If you look at New York City, Giuliani was tough on crime. All this stop and frisk, he swears by it. He says it worked. All this stuff and everything. And you got to look at the gangs and the shootings in Chicago, and you'd have to wonder if it worked there. But by the same token, if you're a law-abiding citizen and you're being stopped and frisked all the time just because the color of your skin, that's got to be frustrating as hell, doesn't it? I would not want to be stopped and frisked all the time. You look at plenty of the stuff on YouTube with white people that don't even want to answer a border patrol agent if they were born if they're a U.S. citizen. But if you go to the stop and frisk stuff, yeah, in certain circumstances, like I gave one example in one of my videos. I was just waiting for a ride home, and the officer stopped me because in those days, Seaside Heights, especially the weekends and late at night and stuff, that there was crime there. So they got to patrol it. And hey, what's this guy doing out here on the street at whatever it was, 1-2 o'clock in the morning? What's he doing out here? Don't you feel better that the police would ask somebody out at that hour in your neighborhood what the hell they're doing out on the street? I do. I don't want people, walking through my apartment complex at all hours of the night and stuff, and that, or in the neighborhood. Lots of people in Arizona, lots of things are done at night though. People go jogging, all kinds of stuff at night because of the heat. So, but in certain circumstances, yeah, it's a good idea for a police officer to see somebody in a neighborhood out on the street in the middle of the night. What the hell's this guy doing here? Stop and check him out. Unfortunately, in my case, I could smell beer on the officer's breaths, and I got a couple whacks under my arms with a stick that were a little harder than they needed to be when he was telling me to assume the position. So in one case, he was doing his job. In the other case, he was overzealous in his job. So that's what we got to look at. There has to be some common sense, is that officers are given the duty to protect our neighborhoods. And even though you might not think you're doing anything suspicious, the cop might be like, what's this person doing out here in the middle of the night or something? Let me check him out. I gave another example. I was walking home from work when we very first moved to Arizona, and I was 16, 17. Had to walk about a mile home. late at night. Officer stopped me, asked for my ID and stuff, looked at the bottom of my shoes and this and that, asked what I was doing out there. I'm like, I'm just walking home and stuff and everything. He said, well, there's a curfew and stuff, and plus there's been burglaries in the area. Okay. So it happens to white people too. We get stopped also and asked what we're doing in certain circumstances. Late at night, walking, whatever. A lot of crime happens late at night. People out and about, a lot of break-ins, a lot of stuff goes on in the middle of the night. So, but if you were to be in a neighborhood where you're stopped and frisked all the time just because of the color of your skin, yes, that would be extremely frustrating. And I think I would get to a point too, if I was stopped and frisked broad daylight all the time, or a police officer asking me stuff all the time, every day I walk to work or something, wanted to stop and frisk me in broad daylight and stuff, I'd be like, this is crazy, this has got to stop. So I can understand that from the African American community. But did it work? There's people who say, especially Giuliani and stuff and everything, the black on black crime overall went down during those policies, that they saved lives. So you have to look at that aspect of it too. Would it work in Chicago? Would it save lives in Chicago? Would it get guns off the street? I'm sure it would. Would it be frustrating as hell to law-abiding citizens to have to deal with that, to being stopped all the time just because they're African American, stopped and frisked? It is a violation of your civil rights to be stopped and frisked, no matter what color you are. If you're just minding your own business, walking down the street. But in certain circumstances, we got to ask ourselves: is something like that necessary? If you ask people like Giuliani and those, they'll say yes. So we have to have that discussion. What's acceptable tactics? And if that tactic is unacceptable, stop and frisk and everything, people find that completely objectionable, then we have to ask ourselves, what else can we do? What else can we do to get the guns off the streets, to get these gangs to stop killing each other and killing innocent people, little kids who have nothing to do with any of that drug crap? We have to have discussions. And what you're seeing right now is people don't want to have discussions. They want anarchy. And there's a lot of people who are sympathetic, like you and I are, and outraged over what happened. And that sympathy and that outrage is being parlayed into something else. There are people who are like, yeah, I'm down with this stuff, so it's got to stop. They go to the demonstration, and while they're at the demonstration, all this other stuff starts about dismantle police departments while there's looting going on and stuff. And you gotta, even if I was at one of them demonstrations, I'd be asking myself, what's going on? I'm here to protest police brutality and racism, racial profiling, police tactics, whatever. I'm here to protest that, to give a wake-up call to America, and now I'm hearing about how all of society is evil, police are evil, kill police, all these other things. You see what I'm saying? You might be sympathetic and outraged like I am. You might go to lend support to show your outrage and stuff. And then all of a sudden you're going to get caught up into this stuff where, well, now you got to go the next step. Now you got to hate the police. Now you got to hate all of society. Now you got to hate white people, whatever it is. So you can be outraged and sympathetic and want to look for answers and to solve these problems. But there are those groups, within those groups, there are people who want to drag you into madness. That it's not about solving police brutality to them. It's about power to them. It's about anarchy to them. It's about retribution to them. It's not about having a discussion and seeing where we can get some kind of, logical, common sense solutions to the problems we face. It's just about, overturn all of society. Get rid of police departments, all this stuff. Those are not the answers. And if you're, at one of these protests or something and you're trying to show your sympathy and your outrage and that you want things done, you want some changes made to the tactics of police departments and the communication. The community has to have communication with city councils and mayor's offices and police departments long before anything like this happens. See, that's what I think is wrong also with everything on the federal level gets all the attention, all the money flows to DC and stuff. People, and they're not teaching civics in school, people are not involved in their local governments. They are not involved in their communities, within the government of their communities. They pay attention to all the national stuff. They pay attention when something tragic happens. But other than that, they're not taking part with the system within their own communities. You can't say, police, we're going to defund you, we're going to get rid of you and all this, and you're not going to address the mindset of the criminal element in this country. You're not going to address the mindset of these gangs and these drug traffickers and stuff, and the lawlessness, and the mentality that you can loot and you can shoot police officers. We have problems. We have to look for the answers, and we have to look for the answers together. But we can't let sympathy and outrage drag us down this rabbit hole of madness. If you find yourself, you're searching for the answers, and you hook up with these groups, whether it's Black Lives Matters or any other thing like this, and then all of a sudden you find they're expecting you to be more militant, more this or that or whatever like that. You got to ask yourself, is that what you want? If they're asking you to be an anarchist, is that what you want? Or would you rather have answers and live in a community in peace and harmony with your neighbors of every color? People in the African American community got to condemn black racism against other races, just like white people got to condemn white racism. I don't know how many people associate themselves with the Ku Klux Klan or have white supremacist views or Nazi views in this country, but I'm willing to bet it's very, very small percentage of the white population. Like, I'm willing to bet it's less than 1%. Might be wrong. Maybe it's more. But and I'm white. I know I've known a lot of white people in my life. There have been a few when I lived in Florida that, were out and out right racist, and my daddy's in the Klan and this and stuff and everything. I didn't hang with them people. Didn't want nothing to do with them. Here and there, you might find a pocket, so, one family in a town might be like that. Everybody else in the town is normal. Gets along with anybody of any color, of any background or religion. So I find mostly in America, we get along with each other. It's just us. We get along with each other with no intimidation, no fear of each other, no nothing. It's when the media and celebrities and politicians and stuff like this, when they stoke the fires, that's when normal people who would normally just, get along with each other, work side by side together, go to a ball game together, do whatever of different races and stuff. That's when the wedge starts in between. Is when politicians, and it's the same with religion too. Most people of, different religions can hang out, they can work together, they can hang out, they can, be friends, this and that and everything, until some scholar or some preacher, gets in their head and starts driving this wedge that, you can't, these people are against you and this and that, and we gotta, defame their religion, whatever. Most people can get along. Most people want to get along. When I look at the world and I see how many different types of people there are and everything, it's like, thank God. The world would be pretty damn boring if we were all the same color, wouldn't it? That's the way I look at it. That's the way I've looked at it for a long time. If we were all exactly the same and all looked the same color, it'd be pretty boring. I don't know, maybe that's the way it's supposed to be in the long run or something. I don't know. But I don't think so. Not from what I've read from the New Revelations or what I've seen on YouTube about them. Is that all cultures can keep their own cultures and stuff. All the cause of God, the New Revelations say is for us to treat each other with respect. And even in your Bibles it talks about well-balanced scales. That just doesn't have to do with money. So we don't have to lose our identity of who we are, or our nations don't have to, succumb to other nations' ideologies and stuff like this. And it says, you can keep your culture. Just live in peace with everybody else. Just like it says in the Bible, it says in the Quran. It says that in the New Revelations. Peace is way better than war. Peace is way better than what we're seeing going on in the streets right now. To try and work out the problems that we have rationally, logically, like adults. We all tell our kids, whether we're black or white, whatever we are, violence isn't the answer. We all tell our kids, well, apparently some people are not telling them that now. Violence isn't the answer. We teach our kids that in relationships between men and women. We try and teach our boys growing up. Violence isn't the answer. You never hit a woman. She's not your property. She's not, she's a human being. She can develop. She can go to school, go to work and everything, just like a man can and stuff and everything. She's this idea you get, she's your property and you keep her barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, that's outdated. That ain't it no more. You're not gonna have a successful marriage. You're not gonna have a successful relationship. She has a mind and spirit and everything, and is able to think and has attributes that she might want to use to work or to do whatever, or to become an activist in and stuff. She's not just some sex toy you pull out once in a while, and after that she's just barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. She's a human being just like you, has thoughts and opinions on stuff and everything like that. So you gotta teach young men coming up these days on how they think about women, how they think about dealing with people of other races. It's 2020. Whether I'm talking to criminals or the average person that's thinking what's the future hold for us all, it is 2020. We have to start addressing the way we think about things and each other, and look at rational ways to make things better and to move forward into the future. Because if we go down this rabbit hole of the only way to solve things is anarchy and calling for the assassination of police officers and let's make drug use more common and stuff, we're done. We are done. Society will fail. If we can't have trust between each other and have dialogue between each other and be real with each other, you know, I can be real about, yes, there's racism, there's racist white people in this country, and there have been. But I can also tell you, you know what? And I can tell you, yes, slavery was wrong. But I can also tell you, you know what? There are thousands upon thousands of white people who died to end slavery, who fought against their own families to end slavery, who never made a dime from slavery, and that most whites in this country came here, and the wealth that we have, most of it came after World War I and World War II. We were the only industrial power left. But you have the storyline out there that all whites benefited from slavery. All whites were lockstep in it. And all the wealth and everything, you know, that this country has and the power it has and everything all came from slavery and all this and everything like that. Go back and look at the economics. Look at the size of the country. Look at how people lived. Just as many poor sharecropping white farmers and stuff and people living in absolute poverty in the white race as there was the African American race before and after the time of slavery. There are certain organizations and groups, like in Europe mostly, that benefited from the slavery here. People who owned plantations in the South. If you look at the statistics, there was about 20 million people in this country at the time, and like 200,000 of them were plantation owners. So the rest of us are to blame for that 200,000? Come on, man. Let's get real. Had nothing to do with slavery. Nothing. I've traced my ancestors, you know, through Ancestry.com back to, you know, the Revolution. And then some of it back to, you know, overseas and stuff. My family's always been from the North. I have according to Ancestry, if I did everything right in it, I got an ancestor buried in a Revolutionary cemetery in Paterson, New Jersey. His name is Captain Israel Kuhn, which is kind of really strange because my half-brother, because I traced it on my mother's side of her maiden name. And but at one time she married a man and his last name was Kuhn, and so my half brother, my older brother, he's my older brother, he's passed now, but his last name was Kuhn. So it's kind of odd that way back on my mother's side there's somebody with the name of Kuhn, and here it is generations later she married somebody with the name of Kuhn who was of no relation. Kind of weird. But what is it they say, 6 degrees of whatever, Kevin Bacon. So anyway, this one's just a call out for people to be rational and say, yes, there's things we gotta look at. Socially, scientifically, we have to look at as Americans of every race and every religion and say, look here, we can do this. We can pull it together to where we still all have a future together. We have to address white racism. We have to address black racism, maybe Hispanic racism. I've met plenty of Hispanics who, you know, we're racist one way or another to either African Americans or to whites. So, racism is not just, it's not just a white disease. You understand? We have to look at it at all sides, and we have to look at police tactics from all sides. We have to look at what's acceptable in communities. Is stop and frisk acceptable if there's dire situations and constant loss of life from gangs and this and that? With the constant being stopped, and is that something you'd be willing to put up with if it meant saving the lives of young black men in Chicago? Or the innocent victims, the little kids that end up getting shot? Is that something you'd be willing to put up with if it would get the guns off the street and save your children? Or do you think after a while you'd be, because I know after a while, being stopped and frisked in broad daylight going to work all the time, that would be old to me. But if there was so much crime going on, it was being committed by white guys and children were being killed, would I be able to look past my discomfort of being stopped all the time and say, hey, it's necessary? So these are the types of discussions we have to make and have. Standing out in the streets screaming, kill the cops, get rid of the cops, looting, walking up and harassing innocent people who have nothing to do with anything and forcing them to kneel and stuff, that's not the answer. I'm sorry, it's not the answer. You're making things worse. All right, wish you all the best out there. God bless. We'll talk to you next time. Adios.